Good day everyone. My name is Merenes Erolas from BSED English 2A, and I'm going to discuss about the theories of second language acquisition, the acquisition learning distinction. Theories of second language acquisition. Second language acquisition theory seeks to quantify how and by what process individuals acquire a second language. The predominant theory of second language acquisition was developed by the University of Southern California's Stephen Krashen. Krashen is a specialist in language development and acquisition, and his influential theory is widely accepted in the language learning community. Theories of second language acquisition: universal theory, behaviorism, innatism, cognition, connectionism, sociocultural perspective. It is also means to learn a language other than the mother tongue. Second language can be a third or fourth language in a bilingual, multilingual society where children already have two or sometimes three languages learned in their childhood. Be clear, second language here means any language not acquired as mother tongue. Let's proceed to universal theory. Universalist theory defines linguistic universals from two perspectives. First, the data-driven perspective, which looks at surface features of wide range of languages to find out how languages vary and what principles underlie this variation. The data-driven approach considers system external factors or input as the basis. Second, the theory-driven perspective, which looks at in-depth analysis of the properties of language to determine highly abstract principles of grammar. System internal factors are those found or cognitive and linguistic process. Number two is behaviorist theory. Four characteristics of behaviorism. First, imitation. Second, practice. Third, reinforcement. And four, habit formation. Brooks 1960 and Lado 1964 emphasizing mimicry and memorization, audiolingual teaching and methods. Person learning. An L2 starts of which the habits form in the Li, and these habits would interfere with the new ones need for the L2. Behaviorism was often linked to the contrastive analysis hypothesis or CHA. It predicts that where there are similarities between the Li and the target language, the learner will acquire target language structures with ease. Where there are differences, the learner will have difficulty. Criticism about the CHA through a learner's Li influences the acquisition of, and research have found that L2 learners do not make the errors predicted by the CHA. Many their errors are not predictable on the basis their Li. Example, potted cooker, meaning a person who cooks better than. Some errors are similar across learners from a variant of Li backgrounds. Some the use of the past tense have relative clauses. Ism and natism. Universal grammar or UG in relation to second language development. Krashen's monitor model. UG and SLA. Chomsky has not made specific claims about the implication of his theory for second language learning. Linguistic working within the Ennatis theory have argued the UG offers the best perspective to understand SLA. UG can explain why L2 learners eventually know more about the language than they could reasonably have learned. Example, UG can explain L2 learners' creativity and generalization ability. Other linguists argue that UG is not a good explanation for SLA, especially by learners who have passed a critical period. Example, CPH does not work in SLA. How UG works in SLA? Two different views. The nature and availability of UG are the same in Li and L2 acquisition. Adults L2 learners, like children, neither need more benefit from error correction and metalinguistic information. These things change only the superficial appearance of language performance and do not affect the underlying competence of the new language. Example, Krashen's monitor model. How UG works in SLA, two different views. Number two, UG may be present and available to L2 learners, but its exact nature has been altered by the prior acquisition for the first language. L2 learners need to be given some explicit information about what is not grammatical in the L2. Otherwise, they may assume that some structures of the LI have equivalence in the L2 when in fact they do not. Let's proceed to enatism. Krashen's monitor model 1982. The acquisition learning hypothesis, the monitor hypothesis, the natural order hypothesis, the input hypothesis, and the effective filter hypothesis. The acquisition learning hypothesis. Acquisition, we acquire L2 knowledge as we are exposed to samples of the L2 which we understand with no conscious attention to language form. It is a subconscious and intuitive process. Krashen argues that acquisition is more important process of constructing the system of language than learning because fluency L2 performance is due to what we have acquired, not what we have learned. The monitor hypothesis. The acquired system acts to initiate the speaker's utterance and is responsible for spontaneous language use, whereas the learned system acts as a monitor, making minor changes and polishing what the acquired system has produced. Such monitoring takes place only when the speaker writer has plenty of time, is concerned about producing correct language, and has learned the relevant rules. The natural order hypothesis. L2 learners acquire the features of the target language in predictable sequences. The language features that are easiest to state and thus to learn are not necessarily the first to be acquired. Example, the rule of the adding an s to third person, singular verbs, and the present tense. The input hypothesis. Acquisition occurs when one is exposed to language that is comprehensible, that contains I plus L. If the input contains forms and structures just beyond the learner's current level of competence in the language I plus L, then both comprehension and acquisition will occur. The affective filter hypothesis. Affect refers to feelings, motives, needs, attitudes, and emotional states. The affective filter is an imaginary metaphorical barrier that prevents learners from acquiring language from the available input. Depending on the learner's state of mind, the filter limits what is noticed and what is acquired. Summary: Krashen's monitor model, example acquisition versus learning monitor, natural order comprehensible input, and effective filter, has been very influential in supporting communicative language teaching or CLT, which focus on using language for meaningful interaction and for accomplished tasks, rather than on learning rules. Krashen hypotheses are intuitively appealing, but those hypotheses are hard to be tested by empirical evidence. Cognition information processing. Cognitive psychologists working in this model compare language acquisition to the capacities of computers for storing, integrating, and retrieving information. Do not think that humans have language-specific module, example LAD, in the brain. Do not assume that acquisition and learning are distinct mental processes. See L2 acquisition as the building of knowledge that can eventually be called automatically for speaking understanding. Let's talk about the attention processing, skill learning, restructuring, transfer appropriate processing. Attention processing. This model suggests that learners have to pay attention at first to any aspect of the language that they are trying to understand or produce. Skill learning. Some researchers regard SLA as skill learning, They suggest that most learning, including language learning, starts with declarative knowledge. Restructuring. Sometimes changes in language behavior do not seem to be explainable in terms of gradual build-up of fluency through practice. Transfer appropriate processing. This hypothesis, the information is best retrieved in situations that are similar to those in which it was acquired. This because when we learn something, our memories also record something about the context and the way in which it was learned. Connectionism. Connectionists attribute greater importance of the role of the environment than to any specific innate knowledge. Connectionists suggest that learners gradually build up their knowledge of language through exposure of the thousands of instances of the linguistic features they hear or see. Sociocultural perspective. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory language development takes place in the social interaction between individuals. Speaking and writing mediate thinking. Let's talk about the causation learning distinction. It is a hypothesis that says that adults have two distinct and independent ways of developing competence in a second language. The first way is language acquisition. The second way is by learning the language. Language acquisition, it is the process similar to the way children develop ability in their first language. It is a subconscious process. The result of the language acquisition, acquired competence, is also subconscious. It is also known as implicit learning, informal learning, and natural learning. Language learning, conscious knowledge of a second language, knowing the rules, being aware of the rules, being able to talk about the rules. Explicit learning, knowing about the language. Language learning acquisition is very powerful process in the adult. Adult can only learn. The acquisition learning hypothesis claims, however, that adults also acquire. Adults also acquire that the ability to pick up languages does not disappear of puberty. Not just children acquire, can access the same natural language. This is subconscious acquisition in the right form of rule. I guess to school every day, alter his or her conscious mental representation of the rule. It doesn't influence accusation to any great extent. As conclusion, parents attend more the truth value what the child is saying rather than to the form. According to Bro, 1973 reported that children acquiring English as a first language tend to acquire certain morphemes early plurals and progressive, and others late third-person singular ending and possessives. The difficulty order was similar to the accusation order. Her Curl My Hair was approved because curling his hair. Walt Disney Comes on Tuesday was corrected despite its syntactic correctness, since Walt Disney actually came on television on Wednesday. The acquisition learning distinction may not be unique to second language acquisition. The acquisition learning distinction may not be unique to SLA.